Bernardo, your host of MyGovWatch Live, the B2G Roundtable. If you're east of the Rocky Mountains here in the U.S., good afternoon, good morning to those out west, and hello to anyone joining us from the far corners of the earth or watching online in the future. Today's Wednesday, April 17th, 2024. This series is brought to you by MyGovWatch. With a curated white glove approach, MyGovWatch delivers leads in more than 200 industries using AI best practices at double the rate of free government tools and at a fraction of the cost of legacy websites. Big government contracts do not start with a solicitation, but all roads lead to one, and your budget for hearing about RFPs does not have to be thousands of dollars per year. Start your 14-day trial today. And this month's very special co-host is Ms. Nikki Charles, a blast from the past. How you doing, Nikki?
Great. How are you?
Welcome, welcome, welcome. So full disclosure, folks, this is a first on MyGovWatch Live. Nikki is a former team member at MyGovWatch before moving on to bigger and better things. I think that was also pre-pandemic, was it not, Nikki?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So yeah, Nikki's been in procurement and been in around purchasing and procurement for years and years. And she's currently the procurement program manager of supplier diversity with South Jersey Gas. Since 2020, she's led her organization's efforts to develop and execute procurement strategies and initiatives, including within supplier diversity. In her role, she increases supplier diversity spending year over year through implementing and managing program objectives, processes, procedures, and policies to train and educate internal and external stakeholders. So, Nikki, I'm going to put you on the spot right off the bat here and say, what is like the biggest misconception people have about supplier diversity, either in general or in an organization like yours?
The biggest misconception. I think the biggest misconception that there is in supplier diversity is that there's I'm trying to figure out how to put this in the best way possible. That organizations are going to give business to diverse suppliers because they're diverse suppliers. That is not at all the case. Organizations of any size are looking for the best quality partnerships, the best return on their investment, the best cost savings, and fiscally responsible purchases. So supplier diversity, if you're a diverse supplier, you still have to be competitive. There's not a situation where it's, well, this supplier is diverse, so they're getting the work. You have to be as good. You have to be competitive. You have to be competitive. It's not going to be as simple as you get it because you're diverse.
Well, it's really interesting because you're sort of echoing what some of the folks who we've had on who are on the government consulting side, things that people like RSM Federal, the folks there, they've been on many times, and they will say this all the time. And you're really saying the same thing from the private organization perspective, and that is, do not lead with your statuses. In other words, all things being equal, if there's a supplier, that can deliver the goods, great. But tell me if you agree with this, or to what extent do you agree with it? That may help to close the deal, but that doesn't get the deal.
Yes. So, well, I'll say yes and no, because in my experience, I'm always looking for a differentiator. And could being a diverse supplier be your differentiator? Yes. But could a non-diverse supplier have a great differentiator also on equal playing grounds? Yes. You know what I mean? So that's one of the things that I'll just say every business needs to have some differentiators that are not necessarily associated with the business, the good work you do in the community. That's a big deal. We want to support businesses who are supporting the communities that we serve. So that's a huge differentiator. If you have something to highlight, like, we volunteer every year at the Boys and Girls Club on this day, tell us that, because that matters too.
And it all adds up. And I've been doing, Nikki, I try to do some fun backgrounds, and I just found this one in the last hour, and I have some vestigial Photoshop skills. And I saw this image and I thought it was perfect for talking about supplier diversity, because I know, whoever had this image taken, it's a very idealistic sort of thing with all the hands reaching in. But I just saw it as there's many different color hands in this photo, but they all have their hands out.
Right. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Because everybody wants a piece of the pie.
Right.
So folks, we try to keep this format of the MyGovWatch Live series very casual. So there are at least 4 or 5 people who I spoke with in last week who will be participating. So if we spoke, you will be asked to join us soon. Tommy, Jamie, Charlie, Dawn, and Gary at a minimum. And so if you have a question during the session, please just raise your hand if we haven't spoken and you definitely want to participate. We need your audio. We'd love to have your video also. But that's not strictly speaking required. So I guess what I'll say is, Dawn, we're going to come to you next, or first rather. But what I'd like to do is I would like to put Nikki on the spot again. And I already know the answer to this question. I'm just going to start with it, Nikki. Like, how did you get into the world of procurement going way back to the beginning of your career? And this is a great story I've heard before, full disclosure, but I think it's a great story to talk about, like, how it works sometimes depending on the organization.
So many, I won't say how many years ago, but a lot of years ago, I worked in a local school district, and my job was really like payroll and accounts payable, but I worked in the business office. And in that business office is where they would receive bids. Now, I did not work in procurement. I don't even know if I knew what procurement was when I was doing this. But every time bids came in, there would be, maybe 10, 15, it doesn't matter how many, there would be bunches of bids for everything because it was a school district. So it was public, it was on the website. So everybody could bid. So there could be 20 bids. And when those bids came in, a stack of them came over to my desk, and the woman who was running things would be like, pick the ones you like. And I would pick the pretty ones, whoever had the nicest colors, or, oh, I really like blue and gold. So I would pick the ones that visually stood out to me that I liked. I didn't open them. I mean, I might have like flicked through possibly, but I would literally just make a pile like, oh, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And the ones I said yes to were the ones that were red. The ones that I said no to were not.
It's
So,
funny. It sort of highlights how Mickey Mouse, smaller purchasing organizations, whether they be private or public, sometimes may operate. But it also makes a really good point about how important the first impression is around, like, what does your proposal even look like? So it kind of makes that point, even though, somebody in your role wasn't really in purchasing, it sort of highlights that, doesn't it?
it does. And thinking back, the many years ago, I'm horrified by that. That's something that I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know any better. And I probably, if I knew what I know now, would have maybe read the first page and probably put some thought into it. But, that wasn't the case at the time.
Well, it's fantastic. And we're going to get into some other questions about what your role is, Nikki. Dawn, I am trying to invite you to join us as a panelist, and it looks like it is working. So, Nikki, we're going to get back to some questions. We're going to talk to Dawn for a moment and see what she's looking to try to accomplish. And by the way, folks, so Nikki's with a private organization, South Jersey Gas. They have a pretty extensive supplier diversity program, but she can answer all kinds of questions about, like, how to identify decision makers and how does purchasing and procurement take place for a significant private organization. So your questions can be about public sector, but a very special episode of MyGovWatch Live could also be about private organization procurement. So Dawn, welcome. Where are you joining us from, and what do you do?
Hello, Nick. I'm in Fort Myers, Florida, and we are a manufacturer and distributor of sutures and meshes for both the human market and the veterinary market. And my question is, what would be the 2 most important things that a company should do when entering the government arena?
Yeah,
Aside from signing up and getting all our ducks in a row, but after we have that, what would you recommend for us?
yeah, I would say understanding your competition would be probably the single greatest piece of advice I would give you. There are so many people and organizations who try to enter into government contracting and maybe even private sector competitive markets. And I'm sure, Nikki, you could speak to this, but a lot of people just sort of go into it willy-nilly, knowing that they have something to offer, but not really understanding how does that compare with the competition. So tell me a little bit more about your products.
Well, like I said, we have this surgical sutures for both the human market and also the veterinary market. We have two brands. Sudamed is one, and VeterSuit is the veterinary brand. And we are like located in Fort Myers, and have partners throughout the world. And we came into the US not too long ago as a market, so it's just kind of getting used to how the US market works and so forth.
Yeah, and it's useful that you mentioned having partnerships all over the world and the US
Mhm.
market. So I
Yep.
would say the first thing is knowing your competition, and you can learn that through what's called the open records laws. Are you familiar with FOIA or the open records laws, Dawn?
A little bit, yes, not in detailed. We have researched our company, or actually our competition. I think we can get into it more. That was previously before I came on board, but I think that's definitely an opportunity.
Yeah, so for those of you on the session today or listening in the future, one way to learn about your competition is to do open records requests after solicitations have closed and contracts have been signed. So you can often find out, especially in product markets where it might be a little bit more price sensitive, you can find out a lot about who is bidding on different contracts and sometimes line item pricing associated with what they're offering. So you can really, really learn about where you should be spending time developing offers and competing and where you shouldn't. There might be certain competitors who are competing for certain products where you might want to stay away from it because you can't compete from a price standpoint, or in certain parts of the country, for example. Another thing that I would recommend, and this is more on the product side, would be understanding what rules or requirements there may or may not be around the source origin of your products. So, are you familiar with, at least as it relates to federal contracting, Dawn, are you familiar with some of the rules and regulations around where you're sourcing some of your products from?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so in the product markets, that would be something that that would be particularly important. Now, you are familiar with the two main things that I came up with, right? So what other follow-up questions would you have? Or I feel like maybe there might be another layer of the question that we could get at. And Nikki, by the way, chime in because some of this may relate to private sector procurement. So if it does, please jump in.
Well, I'll jump in real quick just to say that a lot of private sector procurement um, guidelines and policies really kind of live up to as many government standards as possible. Because from our perspective, if the government is saying that this is right, then it's good for us too. So I'm not saying it's exactly the same. You don't have to go to all the government hoops, but if the government is saying they like to see suppliers working together and giving opportunities for smaller businesses, then that's what private sector is going to say too. So
Okay. All right. Good. I
Yeah,
think
go ahead, Dawn. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say we're also working with a PTAC representative too, so or Apex now, in our local community. So that's given us a little bit of guidance too, which is good. Well, a
Well,
lot of
it's
guidance.
useful. It's useful. And what also comes out
Absolutely.
of the back end of procurements is knowing who are the principals, who are the people who are involved in buying your products. Um, has anyone told you about usaspending.gov?
I've looked at it before briefly. Yes, so I'm familiar with that. That was kind of where we started our research to see what was, what was out there and going on in opportunities.
Yeah, so for those of you who are not familiar with USA Spending, you can do pretty granular searches on who is buying your products and services in federal purchasing. Dawn, we did a press release, and this is probably useful for you to know, and I'm going to share my screen real quick. And this is something that I think anyone would be interested in, and particularly if you're interested in federal contracts. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So we did a press release last year where we studied data federally and we found that up to 38% of NAICS codes being put on procurements federally are wrong, are flat out wrong. Now, that's the
Wow.
bad news. The good news is in product markets like yours, it tends to be a little bit more accurate. So it's about 25%. So about 75% are accurate when a NAICS code is being assigned to a purchase. So as you're doing your research on USA spending or looking for opportunities on SamGov, are you using NAICS codes?
Yes, we are.
Okay. And out of curiosity, how many NAICS codes are associated with your business?
About 6.
Okay. What we've also found is that there are ways that we can enhance data on what's coming from SamGov. So some of the things that we're doing, we're not just sending people leads based on the NAICS code. We are looking at other data points and using artificial intelligence to make sure, to a greater extent, that things that you need to see if you're using our site end up in your inbox in the morning. So, but I would look into the NAICS code stuff because it can be a little. Are you seeing examples of NAICS codes that just make no sense for products that you're looking to sell?
I have not yet, but it will definitely be something that I keep my eye on going forward.
Yeah, and I would say this too, and it may be a little less applicable with products, but sometimes if a federal purchase, if they use the wrong NAICS code, you can challenge that, and it's a very little known notion. So if there's a product or a purchase that's happening federally and you don't agree with the NAICS code that they're using because it might disqualify you as a small business or any number of other things, that's something you can investigate. Or I'm
Oh,
sorry,
okay.
it's something you can challenge.
Nice. Okay.
So Dawn, other questions?
No, I think that's it. Thank you so much for taking my questions. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm going to put you back into the mix as a general audience member, but stay with us. And if you can think of a follow-up question, something else that comes up, we'll bring you back on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. So we have a question from the audience from Vicky, and Vicky's wanting to know, could you elaborate more on the open records request? Is it just for government procurement? Where do you request the info? So I'm going to answer from the public perspective, and I'm going to let Nikki chime in a little bit on things that may touch on this, at least on the periphery, as it relates to private organizations. So as it relates to the open records laws for public institutions and government agencies, every state has their own version of the Freedom of Information Act, which is the federal version. Each state has its own law. So with few exceptions, you can generally get copies of signed contracts, lists of bidders, to often include pricing, any subjective or objective evaluations of the bidders and what they thought of each bidder, and sometimes even a copy of the winning proposal, which for services in particular may be really juicy in terms of the kinds of things you can learn about your competition. Nikki, do you ever have people approach you trying to do an open records request?
So actually, we've had a couple of, well, open records requests, but they actually didn't come directly through someone. So if Nick, you decided to make an open records request to South Jersey Gas, you're not going to get any information. But if you make an open records request through the Board of Public Utilities in the state of New Jersey, and they ask us for it to give to you, we're giving it to them. So that's a little roundabout way of getting information. And honestly, it depends on the information. There's times when we're asked for information and we provide it because it is, for example, if anybody, puts a request in and says, what percentage of spend does SJI spend with diverse suppliers? We're going to give that information. Who are our diverse suppliers? We're going to give that information because we want to promote those suppliers. We want those suppliers to get business with other businesses. We want to, we're proud of what our spend is and the initiatives that we have. If it is something more like our bid sheet or our signed contracts, we're not going to provide that information as a private company. We don't have to, but we would give that to the Board of Public Utilities, and we would give them authorization to share information that they deem necessary to share because we are regulated by that Board of Public Utilities.
Do you ever have people coming at you who feel entitled to information because they may have done an open records request in the private sector?
Yes, we've actually had that happen, probably not much, probably 3 times where they've clicked all the information. And my personal, I have a little experience in that space. So I'm very well versed in answering with a, sorry, that does not apply to us. So we are a private sector organization. So sorry, no, thank you. In more recent years, we actually have a whole external team, a governance team and communications team who now addresses those questions. So today, if I got that email, I would just forward it on to the department who would answer that.
Well, it's really interesting. And Gary Curran, we're going to come to you next, but I'm going to ask Nikki this question. And I think it's important. And this is obviously on the private side, but what is the biggest obstacle that businesses face in trying to do business with larger organizations like yours?
So I would say the biggest obstacle is awareness that there's an opportunity. A lot of organizations will have a public bid page, and everything that comes up for bid is going to be there. And you can easily find out what opportunities are available right now at said organization, but probably just as many businesses do not do that. So at my specific organization, you're not going to go online and Google South Jersey Gas and find our bid opportunities. You need to be invited. So in order to be invited, the right people inside of the organization needs to know who your business is. So that leads into, how do you find those people?
Well, and let's come back to that, because I think that that deserves a whole segment. So Gary Curran has joined us. Gary, can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, thank you for having me.
Hey, welcome to MyGovWatch Live, Gary. What do you do and where are you joining us from?
I'm in Denver, Colorado, and I'm in a merger and acquisition advisor, and with Corporate Finance Associates. And so my interest really is around marketability of VARs that specialize in set-asides, and so specifically woman-owned businesses. Are you aware of any databases that would have information about woman-owned businesses in the U.S.?
So it depends on what you mean by information, right? That could mean any number of things. Nikki, you have some involvement with the woman-owned programs, do you not?
Yes, I was actually in Denver maybe 2 weeks ago for the WeBank annual conference. So, and I also am a member of the certification committee for WeBank East. So if you're a woman-owned business in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and you're trying to get certified through the WeBank East organization, you will probably talk to me, and I will probably come visit your business and see how your business is ran to get more information to decide if, enable us to certify you. So I would say the answer to that question is meeting the people at your local regional WeBank organization. And there's several other, like We Connect. There's probably 5 or 6 that if I wrote them down, I could probably send them to you or put them in the chat. But connecting with those businesses, a way to reach them all quickly is through those advocacy groups.
So Gary, can I ask you, can you elaborate a little bit more on your question, and what is it you're trying to get at?
I'm trying to see if there's a list of woman-owned businesses that do that would also be able to be parsed by revenue and geography and what types of contracts that they have.
Okay, so sam.gov is a resource that that may give you some information. And there's also data APIs. Do you have a tech team that you can work with?
Yes.
Okay, so you might mention to them that there are data APIs. I think it's data.gov. And at one time, you could do searches on sam.gov and just pull up a list of WOSBs based on any number of criteria. I think in the last year or two, they've pulled some of that stuff back from the public. but there might still be ways to get at that data through data.gov. And so you may be able to search on woman-owned businesses by NAICS code, for example. Are you familiar with the relationship between NAICS codes and whether or not a business, whether it's woman-owned or not, whether or not the business is small or not small based on their NAICS code?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Okay, so as you get further into this, what you should realize is that the federal data sources around woman-owned businesses, it's really the only nationwide source of information, including the program that Nikki's involved in. So there are different state programs. There might be certain programs in larger cities and counties across the country, but the most comprehensive will be the federal data set around woman-owned businesses. And every business, regardless of whether it's woman-owned or not, has a size standard associated with it. And to your question about the revenue and the size of the business, businesses are either determined to be small based on a revenue standard in some NAICS codes, or based on a number of employees standard in other businesses. So depending on which industries you're interested in, you need to learn, does that business, based on the NAICS code, is it determined to be a small business based on revenue or based on employee totals? And I guess what I'm getting at is you can look up individual companies on SamGov and you can see if they're representing themselves as a small business, you'll at least know they are below the federal threshold for that revenue total. Does that make sense?
Yes. Do you know what that threshold is?
So it's going to vary by NAICS code. For
Right.
example, some businesses in certain industries may have a size standard of, $6 to $10 million on average for the last 3 to 5 years. There are other businesses based on NAICS code that may be considered a small business under $30 million a year. So it's highly dependent upon the business that you're in, but it is useful. At least they're on one side of the line or the other, if you can look into it.
Okay. Thank
Nikki,
you.
what other thoughts do you have about how we might be able to get at this information?
Lots of thoughts. Again, the advocacy groups, they have lots of databases where you can get information. These businesses are vetted with lots of background checks and financial reporting that they have to provide. So they also like to identify themselves based on their size, because that is helpful in their business development. If they're small, if they are large, and a lot of these companies everybody's very aware of their NAICS code, so they know that information, so they can provide that to the advocacy groups to help people who are seeking them out get the information that they need.
Yeah, and Gary, I wonder, I just want to ask this question delicately. So you have an interest in helping companies acquire one another and merge based on the status, is that right?
That's correct. I have a potential client who actually is in that space and looking to sell the business.
Okay. And this is a business that unquestionably is controlled by a woman or women?
That's correct.
Okay.
However, the revenues is substantially more than what you indicated.
Okay, and that's fine. If you could be a large business and still be a woman-owned business. I guess, the seed I'm trying to plant is that there's no way to sugarcoat it. There's a lot of funny business around some of the socioeconomic statuses. Nikki, do you have any anecdotes around quote unquote women-owned businesses that contact your organization from time to time?
So one of the first questions, and I say this coming from a view of having to understanding what the certification process is and a lot of what goes into that certification process, there's always, not saying that everything is questionable by any means, but there's a lot of people who like to represent themselves as woman-owned, but then quickly, after that process goes, that woman is no longer signing the checks, or, once they get that certification, things kind of go different. So businesses are very aware of who they're talking to. If I'm talking to a woman-owned business, I want to talk to that person. Let me meet your owner. Let me have that conversation to make sure that that person is still involved in the day-to-day business, because that's very important, especially in the private sector. We still have a lot of audits that we have to, pass with different things. Publicly traded companies have lots of audits to go through. So we also like to make sure that we talk to and see that woman participating in the business just to make sure.
Yeah, and Gary, just to tie a bow on it, and you may have a follow-up question. As someone who's in the M&A business, meaning you are, I'm certainly not. I would be very keen on this notion that there is no such thing as a passive woman-owned business where there's not really a woman running the show. And that also applies to disabled veteran-owned businesses, disadvantaged businesses federally, also state and local programs. So I'm not trying to imply that your client is that way, but as it relates to mergers and acquisitions, I would always be careful about, who is really running the show.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Any follow-up questions?
No, I don't think, well, maybe, how would you go about locating advocacy groups, Nikki?
So I would actually start with on the national level. So most of the advocacy groups have a national brand and then regional brands that are more localized and are hands-on. So WeBank National is great. They're going to give you lots of information, but WeBank in your area will pick up the phone and have a conversation with you and understand what your needs are and help you find the right business because they want to help businesses. Do you know what I mean? So the national levels are educational, have lots of data. But I mean, just Google searching is a great way to find advocacy groups because there's more than just advocacy groups. The other direction that I would also point you in is chambers of commerce. A lot of chambers of commerce do a really good job of identifying, women-owned and minority-owned businesses and helping them meet different people. So I would find your local chamber of commerce, reach out to them, let them know what you're looking for, and they probably will say, okay, well, let's get on a call with our local WeBank and our local WeConnect and who else they know who can help you with your solution.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Gary, we have someone in the session with us who's looking to reach out to you. And this video will be on YouTube later, but what's the best way for someone to connect with you who wants to reach out to you?
It would be Gary Curran, GaryCurran at CFA, Corporate Finance Associates, that stands for Omaha.com.
Perfect. Gary, please stay with us. If you can think of any follow-up questions, you can certainly raise your hand and we'll bring you back in, but thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So, Nikki, a follow-up question, and by the way, Jamie, I'm going to answer your question. You have typed a question. We're going to go to you next. And Jamie, do me a favor, raise your hand if you'd like to be brought in live, or if you just want an answer to that specific question. And depending on what you do, we'll either bring you in or just answer your question. But Nikki, we were talking earlier about figuring out ways to do business with larger organizations. And I guess part of that is knowing or finding ways to get to the right people. How do you recommend that people do that who want to do business with private organizations?
So I would say there's a lot of ways to go about that, depending on the size of the business you have. There's companies that have full-on business development teams. There's, small businesses who are 3 people and they have to make the best of the time they have. I would say for either size, I would get involved in your chambers of commerce because businesses, large corporations, medium corporations, we lean on our chamber of commerces. So if the chamber of commerce is having a event that is doing anything, honestly, I'll tell you that somebody from my company is at every South Jersey Chamber of Commerce event. It's a different person depending on the event, but you will find somebody at SJI at every single Chamber of Commerce event. So if you're at that event and there's 25 other companies in the South Jersey region who are corporations that you might want to do business with, you might have a room full of people that you may want to talk to. Now, a smaller business that doesn't necessarily have the time to physically do outreach and be present, I would say LinkedIn is a really good resource. Find the company you want to do business with and find the people who work there. Find not just the procurement people, but people put their departments on there, and I'm not advising like email stalking people, but sending them messages on LinkedIn saying, this is what my business does. I would like to meet with you. People are always looking to have new businesses come in. So even, the decision makers, they want to talk to 5 different businesses, because one of the understandings that generally we all have, we may not specialize in the thing you do. So we want to know about that thing. You're the subject matter expert on your product and services. You may have a better way to do the thing that we thought we were going to do. So meeting new people is something we're always willing to do, but definitely those in-person touches at the Chamber of Commerce's are pretty valuable, because you get to meet people face to face, and you're not just another message in LinkedIn.
Nikki, do you feel, and this is just sort of off the cuff, but we've noticed in government contracting that there seem to be fewer in-person events, and there's fewer touch points that are face-to-face with government contracting than there were pre-pandemic. Knowing that you sort of have straddled the pandemic with this part of your career, have you noticed changes since the pandemic, or are things on the private side going back to more touchy-feely in-person meetings, or did it come right back after the pandemic?
So it was pretty gradual. I would say 2022 was very much still a lot of virtual events. 2023 was more hybrid. Now it's probably more in person than hybrid. Than virtual. The virtuals have value because they're, I don't want to say easier, but they're easier. I can do more virtual. So I will do things now that I would have not have attended before, because I can do 2 in a day. I can do 2 matchmakers. I can show up to more than one place virtually, but I get more value personally out of the in-person meetings, because sometimes the virtual meetings you don't get to talk to everybody. You don't get to mingle. You don't get to make the networking connections. You see them and you might hear them, and then you make the note to reach out to them. But in person, it's just way more organic.
Sure. Well, it's really interesting because we see it just hasn't come back fully on the government side. So it's an interesting perspective. And so Jamie Timms is with eWire, and what they do is they're a new B2G company, an e-com supplier of wire and cable products and accessories. And Jamie's question is, as an early stage startup, what challenges will we encounter for winning bids, since we will not have any history of fulfillment? So it sort of depends on the level of government, Jamie. And before I answer this, let me throw this to you, Nikki, and let me ask you a related question, but it would be sort of like along the same lines. If somebody's selling wire and cable products, but it's a startup, and they pick up the phone and they happen to get you, how does that go on the private side?
So if they happen to pick up the phone and they get me and they're selling a product, an actual services are a little different than products. If you're selling a product and you are, just making that cold call of, do you need this thing that I have? And first I will find out exactly what it is that you sell. I'll ask you for maybe your catalog or more information about the things that you sell, because generally speaking, I don't know exactly everything that we use and that we need at my organization. So generally, I have to now contact 20 other people and say, do we use this thing? And if somebody says yes, that's awesome, because then I'm going to call you back and say, yeah, we do use this product or service. And then I will get some more information about your company, like how long have you been in business? And that kind of leads into your question of what happens when you don't have that. And that's very different with product and services. But the process would be finding out if we need what you're selling and then getting back to you. And then when I get back to you, I would definitely say, yes, but you know what? We might be under contract with somebody providing us that. And you need to register on our website, and that will be coming. That contract will end in 3 years. So call me in a few years.
Yeah, and you have suppliers of different things, and Jamie, it would be a little better if it were interactive, but I'll just do my best if it's just like a monologue. So there's this thing in federal contracting called past performance, And I'm assuming you may not only be interested in federal contracting, but past performance is an issue because they want to see that you've sold your product or service before for federal contracts. However, your personal experience counts as past performance as it relates to federal contracting in the bid process. So don't let anyone tell you that just because you have a new LLC, you can't compete for federal contracts. Now, there may be other reasons why you cannot compete for a specific contract, but simply because you are a new LLC is not reason enough why you could not be awarded a federal contract. I should also tell you that federally there's a pecking order, and this also applies to state and local. So you have something called the micro purchase level, and I think it might be $10,000 or $20,000. But below that level, they don't have to get bids. So I would encourage you to build your portfolio of business and think of it like a food chain, right? So look for opportunities to sell your products in very small amounts to hyper-focused buyers at the federal level or state and local as well, where they do not have to have a bid process depending on the amount of money being spent. So look for smaller opportunities. As you go up the food chain, it does get harder. And there, you may be aware of something you may not be, called the GSA contracts. And I'm sure there's GSA schedules for what you're selling with cabling and wires. But that's a challenge being a new LLC, not because you're new, but because they want to see that you can do that kind of thing and prove that you've sold these products nationally. And that is sort of a prerequisite to getting a GSA contract. Now, if you can show private sector examples of selling product nationally, then it's game on, and you can go towards a GSA schedule contract for your products if assuming that there is one, which I'm sure there is. So Jamie, if you have follow-up questions, you can feel free to type them or raise your hand. If you do, we will bring you on. So Nikki, I guess my next question to you is, what is the onboarding process? Like, what does somebody have to do who wants to do business with South Jersey Gas, whether it's a diverse supplier or not?
So our onboarding process is pretty standard. I think just about everybody has the same onboarding process. They're going to send you to a link and say, fill out our form, upload your documents, provide all of your information so we can get you into our database. That's pretty standard practice is, let's capture your information. I would take that a step further. After I filled out the form, I would send an email saying, what are the next steps? What else do I need to do? Give that follow-up of, I filled out your form. Tell me what I need to do next. Because those forms, especially, I was at a WeBank conference last week and I probably had 300 people fill out that form. So that's just not for me, that's for the whole procurement team. There's a whole intake process where all those documents have to get vetted. All those, there's a verification process that we do where we run every supplier that fills out that form, kind of through a background check that kind of just make sure that your address is real, that your tax ID number is real, that your business is your business. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah,
the vetting process is not just the form. That form triggers kind of this check of you as a supplier afterwards.
And what are any trends that you're seeing? By the way, folks, I'm going to continue to talk to Nikki about her role with South Jersey Gas, but we're looking for folks who want to either A, introduce their business, and you can do that by raising your hand and we'll bring you on. By the way, we've had people in these sessions end up getting clients just from saying what they do from other audience members, or I've had people tell me that clients have reached out just by watching the recording later on YouTube. So raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question or simply introduce your business and we'll just talk to you a little bit about what you do. But Nikki, what are some trends that you might be seeing in supplier diversity, if any?
So there's a lot of trends in lots of different directions, but I'll start with, as somebody who worked in supplier diversity, there is a tight knit kind of group of people who work in supplier diversity. Most businesses only have one of this person, or one person in procurement handling that. So My network is people who work in supplier diversity at hospitals, at the government level, at, construction companies and marketing companies. So we all kind of know I won't say we all know each other, but we know each other. If you are in supplier diversity and you're in the tri-state area, I know who you are. You know who I am. We probably have lunch every quarter. We recommend suppliers to each other. If I meet a supplier and I'm like, oh, this company is great, but our bid isn't for 3 years, maybe PSE&G has something coming up. So I'm going to send this supplier to the person at PSE&G and say, I talk to these people and I would love to give them an opportunity, but I can't right now. Do you have anything? We share information. So I'll say that is a recent trend where we've become very connected in supporting suppliers. The other trends are we can't say yes to everybody, but most of us have this, we want to help businesses. So if I can't help you, I'm going to try to get other people to help you. And sometimes that it comes down to your business isn't, maybe it's not big enough, or maybe you're a new business. I'm going to try to find a supplier that I'm doing business with who does the same thing that you do and connect you with that business, because maybe they can give you business as a subcontractor to help meet our needs also. So there's a lot of connections and networking and just trying to develop suppliers. So in 2 years, when it comes back, maybe you've done enough to be our prime supplier instead of that subcontractor. I would say another trend is there's been a lot of contract splitting. So you might see a contract that's for $20 million in this great big project, and we put it out there. Well, we're doing less of that. We're saying, let's take 5 million of that and make that a part of this, and take another 2 million and make it a part. So we've done a lot of breaking up contracts in order to provide more opportunities to not just diverse suppliers, all suppliers. And that trend kind of comes from the supply chain, the bigger picture of the supply chain issue. Having multiple people doing work helps us make sure we get it done, because putting all your eggs in a basket doesn't work anymore. That's not what procurement people are doing, because we spent the last 2 years putting out lots of fires from not being able to get what we needed. So we want multiple people to give us what we need.
Wow, it's really interesting. I never really thought about the supplier or the supply chain issues and how they would relate to like policy in these areas. And it makes a lot of sense, because it doesn't only benefit you as the buying organization, but unbundling these requirements. It's something that there's a lot of tension with government contracting as well, where smaller organizations, they want the work to be unbundled for the same reasons that you're talking about. And it probably does benefit the private buyers as well. So we have someone who's joined us. Sam, could we ask you to unmute?
Yeah, hello.
Sam, welcome to MyGovWatch Live. What do you do and where are you joining us from?
Thank you. My name's Sam Wolf. I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico. My company is Falling Colors, and we are a financial processing and data collection company. So we sit between a funder, which is usually the government, and the service providers. So primarily in the behavioral health care field. For example, the government says we have money to spend on opiate counseling and domestic violence programs and all that sort of thing for folks who don't necessarily have health insurance or maybe qualify for Medicaid. We contract with all of those healthcare providers, and we build a service platform that we use to deliver data that the government wants about where their money is going back to the government. And then we process the funds so that the providers, once they have said, yes, I treated the following people who are eligible for these services for opiate counseling services, then we process the payments and deliver that to them.
Sam, I remember us interacting. I remember all about your business.
Yeah, you were very helpful with your platform.
Thank you. Thank you. And what sort of questions might you have for us today?
Honestly, it's interesting to listen. I don't know that I have specific questions. I guess one that I'm a little bit curious about is, we are a diverse business. We are women owned. We are also LGBTQ owned. And I wonder if are there states where that's a fact that we might not want to promote? Is that sometimes that, this is a a less controversial, but still in some areas a relatively controversial thing. Do you have any suggestions or advice about learning, which government entities might be looking to avoid certain kinds of diversity?
Nikki, I have some thoughts, but do you want to take that from the private side first, or do you just want to think about it?
Well, I'll say that a good way to kind of get a feel on that, maybe at the state level, is seeing what kind of suppliers that individual state will certify themselves. So in the state of New Jersey, as of May of 2023, New Jersey will certify LGBTQ suppliers. So that says that they're very welcoming to LGBTQ suppliers. So you can lead with that. That can be a part of your selling point because they're sending out the message that this is something we're looking for. Now, another state may not be certifying, and that might help guide you in which states you want to really have that discussion about, you know what I mean? And which states not. And that's the same with every other woman-owned business, minority-owned business. I would look to what the state is encouraging to understand how to approach.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, and Sam, as it relates to federal contracting, there is a program called the Small Disadvantaged program. Are you familiar with that program?
I've heard the name, but otherwise, no.
So at the state and local level, they have MIBI programs, Minority Business Enterprise programs. The federal government has a little bit more of a broader outlook on it, and they refer to businesses, certain business types, as small disadvantaged businesses. And there might be a racial element of that, but there doesn't have to be. So I would encourage you to look into that program as it relates to federal, because I am aware of businesses that sound like yours that may qualify on the basis of things other than race. So there's a partner that we have, the Co-Prince McCall Potroff law firm, and they're huge in federal government contracting. They have a blog that they send out once a month, smallgovcon.com. I would encourage you to sign up for their free email newsletter blog because they write about things like this from time to time. And if nothing else, as things develop in this arena, you'll hear about it because that'll be something that they would definitely write about. So if you have any interest in hearing from those folks, I could put you in touch, but they might be able to tell you that there are companies that have received this disadvantaged status based on some of the attributes of your business.
Thank you. Also very helpful. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So Sam, you're welcome to stay with us, or if you if you'd like, we can put you back as an attendee. But we have another question from Desiree. Desiree is saying, Desiree is with Congruent Connections, and they offer strategic planning to municipalities, utilities, and consulting service practices. They're new in offering municipalities and utilities their services. They're considering responding to their first RFQ, and they're curious about some pointers on how to differentiate the bid. And we'll take that part of the question first. So Nikki, let me ask you, do you ever see things at the opportunity level? Like, are you ever on a buying team that's reviewing RFPs?
So I will say that currently every piece of buying activity, if it's over $75,000, comes across me first. Not first, but as a part of the process, because one of the things I do is make sure that there is a diverse supplier included or a waiver that you could not find one or something to that extent, or maybe it was like a sole source or something. So I do see I don't look at, but every proposal that comes through, I have to click a button and say, or on every bid, I have to click a button and give my approval on the process. So I see lots of things. As a decision maker, don't participate in that anymore, but I previously, before handling supplier diversity, I actually handled all of our, a segment of our professional services having to do with facilities and HR. Those were kind of in marketing were areas that I was on the buying teams, and I read every proposal that came through, and I had to offer my opinion. And I will say that, especially in the utility space, that was one of the items on your list in the utility space. It's very, very important to provide information about how you can partner with us. because we're looking for partnerships. Partnerships are very valuable because in a utility, they're highly regulated, but we are really depending on our suppliers to take us to the next level. We need you to tell us the new technologies that are coming or your capabilities of things that we don't know. So to be very clear on what you do, more than what we've asked you to do, I would say is the big part. So if we're asking you, if your bid is for marketing services, okay, we may be looking for TV marketing or something, advertising. Tell us all the other things that your company is capable of, because we may learn something that we didn't know we should be doing. Be comprehensive. When I say provide more information, I would say not, if they want a 20-page proposal, don't give more than a 20-page proposal, but try to include things that set your company apart. And I'll tell you, every time I talk to a supplier, because I spend a lot of time just on the phone vetting suppliers, my very first question is, tell me what about your company makes you proud of that company. What's the thing? Why are you there, but if you could say one thing, I already know that that you do the thing we need. What's the thing that makes you proud? And sometimes that's, you give 2% of all of your profits to homeless shelters. It could be anything, but that thing is what people are going to remember when they're reading 20 bids that are very similar.
Nikki, it makes me think about this. As someone who had a long career, directly involved in developing proposals, and you're aware of that. I stopped providing that service as a consultant several years ago when multimedia and extremely easy ways of integrating video and other things in your proposals started happening. Are you seeing examples in proposals, especially electronic submissions, of people incorporating multimedia? So it might be a PDF to start, but are people embedding videos? Are they linking to things, encouraging you to go watch something?
They are. There's a lot of presentations that happen in proposals, and they're all very, very exciting. But depending on what you're doing, I'll tell you that first thing we go look at is, did you do what we asked you to do? You know what I mean?
Are you responsive?
Right. Are you responsive in the way we asked you to be? Because you could have the best price, you can have everything, but if it's 40 pages, we're not looking. If we wanted 20, you were considered not non-responsive. If we might go look back if we don't find what we were looking for, but we're not looking at yours unless we have to. If there's something, that we didn't necessarily ask for. As for the all the videos and things like that, it really depends, so if it's something very complex, a lot of IT things have a lot of, though it's appropriate there, I would say, because there's a lot to take in and it's easier to see and listen than necessarily read through. But some things it's not. Sometimes it's a little overwhelming when you're just looking to try to, when it's very objective, we don't need that. When it's subjective, it's a little more important, is probably the best summation.
It's interesting. And Desiree, I would also say, I would be looking at ways to differentiate yourself in the nature of the offer that you're making. So if you're providing strategic planning services, consulting services, there are so many different ways to structure pricing. And I don't know anything about your business, but I wonder if you're doing anything related to outcome-based pricing or success-based pricing around what the potential client's goals are. So anytime in different proposals I've been involved in over the years, anytime we could offer some kind of risk proposition in the pricing where the supplier enters an element of risk, meaning risk they're taking into the equation. If we do X or if we don't do X, it will cost us in Y way. Or if we do Y, then, that benefits you in the following way. And maybe there's some additional payment to the vendor in that case. So I would encourage you to explore different ways of pricing your proposals, because even the pricing can stand out. And if there's 20 offers, you may be one of 5 just because you're offering a novel approach to doing business. So we always encourage that as well. So Desiree, feel free to, you also ask, you recently submitted for WOSB certification, waiting on a response. I guess that's not really a question. It's good that you've done that for reasons we've talked about. So if you have another question, Desiree, feel free. And if you want to join us live and go back and forth, just raise your hand. So another question, Nikki, that's come in, and I think this will relate to what you do as well. Does the supplier need to be vetted? And I assume this person means vetted in your process. Does the supplier need to be vetted if they're registered on SamGov? And Nikki, let me ask you, how familiar are you with the requirements to be on SamGov?
I'm pretty familiar because our company is actually registered on SamGov, and we have to renew our registration every year simply because SAM has to pay their utility bills. So it doesn't matter who they're paying, you have to go through the SAM registration process, even if it's like they need to pay their electric bill and their gas bill like everybody else. We have to go through this process on SAM, which is something that I used to handle, and I'm very happy that I don't anymore. So I'm pretty familiar with the process. And if you are looking to do business in private sector and you are registered on SamGov, we still have to, and when I say we, I would say the majority of businesses still have to go through a vetting process because we are audited on our supplier quality. So we will have our own process that you will have to go through, even though you are registered and vetted with somebody else, because when the auditors come, we need to show them the document that we did our due diligence.
But there's never a case where just because someone has a SAM account, that doesn't allow them to skip your vetting process. It does not, right? Okay. All right. So Desiree has decided to join us. And Desiree, you can share audio, video, or both. Welcome to the session. And what does your business do and where are you joining us from?
So I'm in the Kansas City, Missouri area. And we've been offering business to basically services to consulting service practices, right? So that's been our primary target client, but now we're opening it up to municipalities as well as utilities, and we're exploring the RFPs, the RFQs. We have one in mind that we'd like to respond to. A little nervous about that, of course. Want to make sure that we cross all of our T's, dot all of the I's, and so forth. So Nikki, thank you for answering the question. What we've done and what we've drafted so far is we have the pricing based on the products themselves. So in other words, creating the feedback report based on the surveys and the focus groups in our assessment, followed by workshops that we conduct. And then thirdly, it would be creating the strategic plan. And then number 4 is creating the tactical plan. So there's 5 places of a cost, right? So there's 5 products, if you will, that have a cost associated with it.
So, and did you have a question, a follow-up question, Desiree, around WOSB, or like what other questions might you have about that?
So I'm curious as to whether or not we should wait to submit any RFPs until we have that certification officially. We've submitted all of our paperwork, and that's been a couple of weeks. And so, I don't know if that will improve our chances or if whether or not we should wait.
Can I ask this question? Is this a federal, state, or local opportunity?
This is, let's see, it's an electrical company. So it is a city.
Okay, is it a large city?
Well, no, I wouldn't say it. No, I wouldn't say it's a large city. No.
So I'll give you my take, and then Nikki can give you hers. If they're not saying that they have, some goal in the RFP for WOSB,
yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah. Okay. So it would have no real effect on this particular RFP. But since you are a woman-owned business, there's no time like the present. I don't see any reason why you would delay doing it because it's true today, right? You run the business, you own the business, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So I would recommend doing it because I don't see a downside to waiting other than, the overall busyness of your business life.
Yeah, yeah. We just don't have the we don't have the certification officially yet.
So I would agree because, well, one, waiting might cause you to miss the opportunity outright because they may not be accepting bids by the time that happens, which could very well happen. So I wouldn't miss an opportunity
Yeah.
for it. And I would also say sometimes they take a really long time depending on lots of things. For example, I'm traveling for the next 2 weeks, so every certification is going to be delayed 2 weeks because I can't go visit anybody. So everybody's pushed back 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It could be any kind of thing like that that prevents, things from happening pretty quickly. So I definitely wouldn't wait. I would also say that while it's your first bid and you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's, it's practiced. You know what I mean? Get
Yes.
back when the bid is done. Ask the question, what could we have done? Where do we miss the mark? That way you still get something out of the experience. If you don't win the bid, ask the questions to get the feedback so you know what to do next.
Okay.
Because that bid is going to come back up again in 2 or 3, 4 or 5 years.
Right. Right.
Well, and let me ask this question, and this is really a question for Nikki, but I think it will help you too, Desiree. Is there a debriefing process that vendors are offered, or is it really just, maybe you'll give a debriefing, maybe you'll not, Nikki, when there's a bid process?
So it actually depends on the size and scope, right? So our IT department and our construction departments who have the large, multi-year, multi-million-dollar contracts, they generally do not do a debriefing. They are like, this is it, goodbye, and they will not answer an email about it probably afterwards. But in most professional services, we do generally do kind of a write-up that kind of explains, what went into our decision-making process. We won't necessarily say this company won because, but we'll say things like, this is the best partnership opportunity or whatever. And if you request more information, generally we will answer those questions because in our company, one of our philosophies is we want to help suppliers, even if not diverse suppliers, it doesn't matter. If you have questions onto what you can do better, we want to answer that because in 3 years, we want everything to be very competitive. From our perspective, it's our responsibility to do the best we can with the ratepayers' money that we're using. So the more competitive, the more competition, the more innovation, the better. So we're going to help our suppliers be able to provide that to us so we can make good on our promise to our ratepayers.
Desiree, have you heard of the debriefing process as it relates to government contracting?
Yes. In fact,
Okay.
I worked for the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City for a number of years and was part of their RFP process. And so, like she said, I experienced some of the same thing where it depends on the size of the contract and whether or not we provided a formal debriefing. So yes, I'm familiar with some of it.
That's good. And so you're familiar with that. So that's a possibility. But then there's also that back channel of open records, right? And especially if you have, the ability to do it through us or an attorney, I think you can learn a lot by requesting a debriefing, even if it's state and local, where they might not have formal procedures around debriefing. They might just do it for you. But then if you couple that with information that can come out of the open records process, I think you can really start to understand what happened with a specific opportunity.
So in the open records, could I go out and find the previous strategic plan or this previous all the contractors that submitted maybe 3 or 5 years ago? Can I see that and compare it to what we're putting together?
Yes, to the extent the information exists, it would be available, but there's always a timing issue, especially as it relates to term contracts. So if you're bidding on contract X now with a government-owned utility, it's too late to get the information from 3 years ago if the bid's out today. So what you want to do is you want to do that research 6 months in advance, because open records requests can take 3 to 6 months depending on the size and bureaucratic process associated with the contract.
That makes sense. I was able to find many examples of strategic plans that are completed for municipalities. So that definitely gives us an understanding. They're not too different than what we're already creating anyway, but you know, that did reassure us that we were on the right track.
Yeah, the information's out there. It's just, you know, how much time and effort do you want to put into getting it? But I know, especially for someone like you in the business you're in, I think getting your hands on that kind of information would be extremely valuable, whether you did it through our site or directly.
Okay. Well, good. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you,
for joining.
Nikki.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for joining, Desiree, and we'll put you back into the group as an attendee. So we're just over an hour and 10 minutes. At this point, what we're going to do is just open it up for additional questions, or anyone who wants to raise their hand can introduce their business, say a few words, any parting thoughts or comments about anything you've heard, other questions that may come up, or just somebody who wants to be on YouTube at the end of the week and show everyone that you're on YouTube. Feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to participate in any way, going once, going twice. So Nikki, let me ask you this question and then we'll wrap it up. What events do you have coming up? And what sorts of, you know, are there any events that you're going to or things that people should look out for, particularly in this part of the country, in the Philadelphia, South Jersey market?
So I actually don't have the date right now in front of me, but every week, every year, mid-July, Philadelphia hosts Diversity Week. And it's really a great event because businesses, utilities, government, everybody has different pocket events. So all week, you know, PGW will host a 3-hour, you know, how to do business with PGW, and CHOP will host how to do business with CHOP. So it's really just one of these events where lots of businesses come together to showcase and educate suppliers on how to do business with them. And while I am not a Philadelphia organization, I attend all of those events for myself, and a lot of other corporations do that for educational purposes. PGW's a utility. What are they doing? I want to know what they're doing. What can I pick up from what they're doing to do better at my organization? And there's a lot of people there, a lot of companies to meet. The New Jersey on June 13th is having the Black Business Expo at Fairleigh Dickinson University, where there's lots of businesses to meet, lots of corporations will be there, lots of advocacy groups will be there. Annual conferences coming up. WeBank was a couple of weeks ago, but NGLCC is having an annual conference in July. The NMSDC is having their annual conference in October. And if you go on the South Jersey Chamber of Commerce or the African American Chamber of Commerce or the Pride Chamber of Commerce websites, they all have calendars of events, and I will probably be at least 50% of those events.
Well, it's nice to get out and press the flesh and meet people. There's no substitute for it. It looks like we have one more question, and if you could unmute, I think I correctly pronounced your name the other day. Is it Nitianu?
Nitianu. Yes.
Yes, I got it right. Welcome,
Nick.
welcome. What do you do and where are you joining us from?
Well, I'm a CPA. I work with a startup company, but that's not what my business, the intended business is. I'm from Texas. My friend and I recently incorporated a company in the state of Texas to start contracting for government procurement, and we're trying to understand, get our hands around where to even begin, right? We don't have a preferred NAICS code, NAICS code, but we know that this is something we would like to try on the side and gradually grow it into a business. And so what would you recommend would be a good starting point to start sourcing contracts, and how do we present ourselves in a good way, being that we've never done this before?
So general supplies and services is what you offer, is that right?
Yes.
I would say right off the bat, it sounds like your premise of the business is not necessarily that there's a certain product or service. It sounds like the premise of the business is become a government contractor, and it doesn't really matter what product or service. Is that right?
That's our strategy. Yes.
Okay. I would say right off the bat, you want to narrow your focus quite a bit
Okay.
and try to compete in a more specific market, and don't try to compete for everything that comes out there. So for example, are there certain products or services that you would be more likely to be able to show experience with?
I would say cleaning supplies. That's a good start, I think, that anyone could probably do.
Yeah, so on MyGovWatch, we have over 200 industry categories, and janitorial equipment and supplies is one of those categories. So, if you're just in Texas, you can have a free account on our website, a basic edition, which gives you access to one state, and you'll see county, municipal, and state opportunities. You won't see opportunities from 18 other government types, but at least from those three, you would see them. But I would encourage you to at least have a lead source, whether it be our site or going to, hundreds of websites every week and looking for things. But you want to see what they're buying, right? And you want to see it in real time. So I would
Okay.
encourage you to give our site a try, whether it's a paid version or the free version. And I think that will sort of start you down the road of knowing what the government's buying so you can decide what you want to be when you grow up. Nikki, anything to add?
I'll say the same thing I'll say to every supplier I talk to: find a mentor who has already navigated not necessarily the same business, but maybe who started a few years ago, and find out what their difficulties were and how they resolved them, to kind of take their lessons learned so you don't have to learn them too. And that's
Yeah.
just small business, startup recommendation to save yourself some time and energy.
Where do I find a mentor? You had mentioned advocacy groups, Chamber of Commerce, maybe start there.
Yes, so I would definitely say that I would start with your Chamber of Commerce. If you connect with somebody at your local Chamber of Commerce, say that you're a startup, they will probably within 10 minutes of the conversation have 3 or 4 businesses in mind who've been where you are now, and will say, call this person, and they will be happy to help. Diverse businesses, one of the things that they do a really good job of is pulling up other diverse businesses.
Okay.
So if you are a diverse business, and even if you're not certified now, you can still move in those circles and get what you need, and get the guidance you need, and get the mentorship and the relationship building that you may need to, have the business go from, something you're trying to start up to something a little more.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks. That's very helpful.
Thank you for joining us, and feel free to join us on a future episode as well. Nikki, it looks like we have one more question, and let me just change the role to attendee. And this is from Shayna, and Shayna is with CE Fiber, currently based out of Arkansas, offering services surrounding fiber optic construction and installation. And Shane is curious about where to explore smaller micro purchase opportunities within federal and state organizations. Great question, Shayna. Very specific question. Here's what I would tell you. The first thing you're going to want to do is identify which states that you would like to explore this concept in. So for example, just Arkansas, for example, I would go investigate, doing Google searches, what are the purchasing thresholds associated with state purchases in Arkansas? And then depending on what part of the state you're in, what county or counties you're in or near, and whether you're near Little Rock or any other significant place with a lot of people in it, there might be municipal policies that have their own purchasing thresholds for what can be purchased without a competitive bid process. So I would focus on Arkansas, study state and county and local, and try to investigate what those thresholds are, and ask yourself, do I offer anything that would even be below that threshold? And you may find that the average purchase of your products and services may be above what that threshold is. You may even invent something that is below the threshold specifically so you can offer something below the threshold. So be clever in terms of your products and try to offer something that's below the threshold so that you can sell it below the threshold and have a reference that then will get you to the next level of purchasing. At the federal level, there are known thresholds, and I would spend some time on USA Spending to see who is buying those products and services. And there are ways that you can do that on USA Spending by looking up NAICS codes. So you need to understand what your NAICS code is, or NAICS codes are, and then you can start to figure out, like, who should I be calling about offerings that you might have below the federal micro purchase threshold. So Shana, we encourage you to join us on another future session. And you're welcome. I see that you've typed thank you. You're very much welcome. We always love having people join us live, and please join us again in the future if you're able to do that. So, Nikki, any parting thoughts, or are we going to wrap it up?
I guess my parting thought would be about the last question about those thresholds. They can vary so drastically, so it's so important to go look them up. For example, our threshold is $75,000, but PGW, which is a very similar company but has the city mandates, even though it is a utility, their threshold is very, very low. Like, they have different levels, but they go down to $500 of depending on the item and what's happening. So don't see one city and think that that's really it. You kind of have to do the research and get the information.
Yes, it's really hard to get one piece of information in this world. Don't run with that. Like, it may just apply in one small case, right?
Right.
Well, Nikki, thank you so much for joining us. And folks, with that, what we're going to do is we're going to start to wrap things up here. I'm just going to share my screen one more time and just remind people that the MyGovWatch Live series is promotional to get people to know about and consider signing up for MyGovWatch.com. So, folks, that'll do it for today's edition of MyGovWatch Live. And Nikki, just while I'm doing the parting thoughts here, is it possible you could share your LinkedIn in the chat?
Oh, yep. I'll drop it in there right now.
Okay. So, folks, we offer a 2-week trial on the website. So remember, if you're not already a subscriber, start your free 14-day trial of MyGovWatch.com today also. If you want to win more government contracts for less, you'll be glad you did. And Nikki, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. It was great. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, folks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.